Hey everyone, Caleb with Antique Book Collective, and today I'm getting to you guys with another economy update. I'm doing this instead of the whole walk with me sort of video that I normally do on Thursdays. Not only is that because I have Thanksgiving stuff going on, but I'm sure you guys do as well, so doing a premiere probably isn't going to be for the best. So with that said though, I wanted to say before I really dove into things that there's quite a few different sayings out there about like economic stuff, that sort of stuff, and one of the ones that I personally have heard this past year that I really liked, it was don't plan just for the end of the world. The end of the world only happens once. And with that said, I just want to say, yes, the economy might be going down. Some people say it definitely is. Now there's starting to be some people that say there isn't, all that sort of stuff. I'll get into that later on in the video. But yeah, the economy's going down, but that doesn't mean the world is ending. That doesn't mean we're all going to die. And will we all die? Potentially. But at the end of the day, if you bet on us all dying, then I mean, that sort of doesn't really help you because you'll be dead too. So that's one of the whole things about don't plan for the end of the world. It only happens once. But in addition to that, the odds of it not being the end of the world, statistically speaking, are pretty stinking high. So I just wanted to preface this whole video with the world's not over. Yes, the boom times are most likely very much over. If we've looked at this past year, we can definitely agree to that just because of what the economy has done over this past year. We've seen huge levels of inflation. A lot of people will reference the government stated inflation numbers. Other people will say those numbers are totally fraudulent because they are doctored every single year. They change how they do it every single year, that sort of stuff. And then in addition to all that, sometimes the government figures, they will release them and then days later, months later, even like a year later, they will actually doctor the numbers once again to make them potentially more honest and show that things actually could have been worse back in the day. There's lots of stuff going on with all that sort of thing, but I'm not really diving into all of that just because it's really complex and convoluted, and a lot of that is opinions. Personally, I agree with a lot of these opinions. I've seen a lot of the numbers for that, but it really gets into the weeds. So I just wanted to sort of state the more concrete things and the historical facts because a lot of people say history always repeats. I personally agree to that a little bit, but another group of people say history never repeats, but it does rhyme. Other people say, oh, it's new. Nothing's going to happen the same ever again. And those people, historically speaking, are always wrong. The people that say, oh, this time it's different, are always wrong historically. But let's just say the first two camps, the people that say always repeats and at least rhymes, if nothing else, those people have been proven correct throughout all of history. So I personally like being in that camp. I'm a student of history, meaning I like to study history. I like to see the trends of history. I like to ascertain from those trends what I believe is going to happen. In addition to what I personally go through, I also look at dozens and dozens and dozens of different people of quite a few different viewpoints in order to get the most accurate and wide encompassing viewpoint for myself, because for me, I am an investor in stocks. I am an investor in different businesses. I know I am doing a book channel. I know that seems like such a random thing, but honestly, this is sort of an offshoot of my interest in history. I mean, I've told you guys in all these different videos, I mean, right here I got a stack of history books. Actually, only a couple of those are history books. Other ones are antique books from history. There we go. But I have all these different books, and one of the reasons why I'm doing this whole business is because of my interest in history. In fact, I would say a very, very large reason for why I do that is, and honestly, if you guys study a lot of economists who are not the more new agey sort of economists who are modern monetary theorists and Keynesian economists, which are just monetary ideas, economic ideas over the past century or so, ergo, they're not as tested as the tried and true methods that are around that the history books speak of. If you listen to the more down-to-earth, historically minded people, those people are big students of history as well. Everything that they say they believe is going to happen, they are like, well, back in 1512, this happened, and this followed this, which followed this recession, and da-da-da-da-da. And they walk you through an entire, domino chain of the events that have happened in the past, and they're like, and what we're seeing right now are these first 5 dominoes have already occurred, and these first 20 dominoes, these first 100 dominoes, like these people, they study history as the means of them studying the economy. And for me, I personally do that as well. In addition to just, there's different things that I am personally interested in that I just study for fun. So because of that, I am able to, yes, study the stuff for the economic side of things, but there's also just certain random things that's like, ooh, that's pretty dandy. I think I'm going to look into that. Wow, no way. It's just one of those things that you'll eventually branch off and learn random different things, but all that can stem off of your main interest. So for me, again, my main interest is history. This entire book business stemmed off that interest in history. All of my stock investing, all of my various other investments that I do that are doing very well, in fact, are all stemming off of my understanding and study of history, of my study of economics, all that sort of stuff. So with all that said, I know I was sort of trashing on the schools of thought for the economy that are only basing stuff off the last 100 years or so. And yes, I did bash on them, but the examples that I'm going to use for this little video are ones that are from the last 100-ish years. And the reason why I'm doing that is just because it's a little more easy to grasp for people like us. I mean, there are lots of further back in history things that I could, of course, reference because there's so much stuff that has happened in history before and is happening again, but I'm not doing that for this video just because I want the easiness of grasping stuff just for you guys, basically. So with that said, I just wanted to start off with stuff that we've seen over the past couple of weeks. So I'm doing this recording on the 23rd of November right now, 2022, and this, just a couple of weeks ago, we saw a town in Pennsylvania go claim bankruptcy over their pensions because their pensions weren't doing great. Shortly thereafter, with everything happening in FTX, we actually saw, I believe the number that I heard was $80 billion. Don't quote me on that number, but quite a large amount of money was lost for a certain province of Canada for their teachers union. And I just saw another article just yesterday or the day before, and it said that group has actually written off. They've basically said, oh wow, we totally messed up, we're not getting this money back. They've written off that amount of their investment. And besides all that, though, we've seen a lot of other people lose billions and billions and billions of dollars. And I'm not just talking millions. You can lose a few $1 million as an individual, and yeah, you're gonna really hurt. And especially as a teachers union, yeah, you're really gonna hurt if you lose millions, but you might be able to recover. You'll probably be able to recover. If nothing else, you could go bankrupt, and do all that. But we're talking billions and billions of dollars. It's not often you lose billions of dollars of your own savings, of your own retirement, that sort of stuff. So that is stuff that we have not seen for quite a few years. The last time that I personally recall seeing any pensions and whatnot going completely bankrupt, towns going bankrupt, was during 2008, during that whole crisis. I'm sure I could look up a bunch of different examples of towns that did go bankrupt in 2008. I didn't do that for this video just because I didn't want to list off a whole lot of things and just bore the poop out of everyone. But there were quite a few towns, even in the United States, that went bankrupt. Personally, from what I saw, most of those towns were in the Rust Belt, but of course, I'm sure there were other towns elsewhere that had that same sort of thing happen. So with that said, though, these bankruptcies, it definitely does sort of send off the little alarm bells for me of, oh wow, 2008, and in addition to that, with the teachers union losing that much money, first off, there's a whole lot of fraud going on in the retirement system as it is. If you guys would like to learn more about that, Robert Kiyosaki, the Rich Dad Poor Dad guy, he actually made an entire book on Who Stole My Pension. That's what the title is. So that might be worth looking into if you guys would like to look into that any amount. Personally, I am not recommending anything. I'm not your financial advisor. All I'm doing is sharing what I have seen, what I am personally looking at, what I'm personally considering in my own investments, all that sort of stuff. So with that said, though, on to the FTX thing. So FTX, if you guys don't know, that was a cryptocurrency exchange. Personally, I've never really invested in cryptocurrency. I studied it. I do study it quite a lot because I think it's a very interesting thing, but there is a lot of fraud in that space. I don't really want to dive into if I think cryptocurrency is the best thing ever, the worst thing ever, or somewhere in between, but I am going to say that we have seen a whole lot of pain in the cryptocurrency sphere this past year. I know that there's a lot of people who are like, oh, but I invested 20 years ago and I've made so much money. Actually, you can't do 20 years ago. Bad example. I invested 10 years ago. How about that? In this, and I made so much money. And yeah, you can make a lot of money, but let's just look at it this way. You can make a lot of money at the beginning of a Ponzi scheme and then sell at the height of it and make a lot of money, and you'll be happy and everyone else lost. But at the end of the day, it just was a Ponzi scheme in that example. Am I saying cryptocurrency is a Ponzi scheme? I'm not saying anything. I'm zipping my lips. I'm not saying nothing. not going there. That's not what this video is about. That's not what this channel is about. If you guys want to dive into that, there's a lot of different channels that talk about cryptocurrencies. For me, I like to look into one channel in particular that addresses cryptocurrencies, Blockworks Macro. Sorry, I'm not going to link to them, but you guys could just look up on YouTube Blockworks Macro, and they address the economy at large, but they also address cryptocurrencies a little bit. I guess they're like a sister channel of a channel that actually just like only talks cryptocurrency. For me, I don't like subscribing just to things that only look at certain things. The only exception I make to that is for gold and silver, because I like shiny things, so I like looking into those things just because they interest me. I know that makes you guys think that I hate crypto. Again, I'm not going into that, but I like shiny things. I will admit it. I'm a dude. Dudes like shiny things. That's just what happens with dudes. That's why I like my shiny books. Some of my antique books are shiny, and that makes me happy. But again, I'm not diving into all that too much for this video. I don't want to get too boring, too into the weeds, because at the end of the day, really going into the statistics of things doesn't help everyone. More like bringing things to mind, I would say, helps people in the long run. And if you guys want to get more statistics, all that sort of stuff, you can check it out on Google, DuckDuckGo, Bing, all that sort of stuff, and you guys can do your own research. You can come up with your own opinions. I'm just sharing the cold hard facts that I know, the memories that I have, all that sort of stuff. And in addition to the memories that I have, I'm also sharing the stuff that I've learned from history, the things that I've read, the things that I've learned from people that I talk to about historical events, because for me, I don't like learning all my stuff from just one source. I like to learn everything I can from as many people as I can, preferably people with different outlooks on all these sorts of things. So with that said, though, back onto the FTX thing. So cryptocurrency exchange, it just went belly up. I guess they're talking about potentially bringing it back, and potentially that is a possibility. It basically depends on how things go in the long run. Personally, I think the founder dude is an absolute dirtbag criminal, but that's just me. I don't really want to dive into that, so that's just an opinion. But what do you expect when you have someone that's basically running a bank? I mean, if we've learned anything from history, it's that the financial industry, banking industry is normally like they got their fingers in all sorts of pies that they should not have their fingers in, and it doesn't end well. And yeah, that's an opinion. That's so bad. But look at 2008. You had all the Wall Street people that did all these terrible things. How many people went to jail over that? Not many. If I remember the numbers right, I think I heard one person went to jail over all that. And that was largely a crash caused by the financial industry alone. In addition to that, you had the whole Great Depression. A lot of that was just the banks and financial industry doing that one. However, that one was mostly the banks back in the day. Besides that, we also have 2001. That was largely Wall Street that sort of caused that one. The 80s, that was largely Wall Street again. And time and time again, we see the banks and Wall Street getting together. Sometimes the banks actually own these or are affiliated with these Wall Street trading branches, and they really get these things really messed up because they engage in all sorts of bad shenanigans. A lot of that shenanigans does get traced back to the government, because the government doesn't make life very easy for a lot of people. So because of that, when the government does certain things, private industry has to do certain things, and it just can get really convoluted and really bad. I don't really want to dive into that, all the different policies that go into place that cause these things. But for one very rough example, so in the early 2000s, we saw the US president declare that everyone should own a house, basically. So everyone started getting houses, and because the government was pushing for everyone to get houses, the private industries, the banks, the trading arms of different businesses, they had to financialize and get people a lot more houses. They had to approve a lot more different loans because of what the government had done. And because of that, we saw people getting homes that could not afford homes. Some people say those people shouldn't have homes because they're thinking from a whole financial standpoint. Personally, I think a lot of people should have homes. I don't think homelessness is a good thing, but I do understand where they're coming from. But at the end of the day, these people could not afford homes, but because of the government, these people were basically being sort of herded towards home ownership. And again, they couldn't own these homes. We had something called ninja loans, no income, no job, ninja. And because of that, a lot of these people were getting these homes. They couldn't afford these homes, but they were getting them just because of what the government was pushing. And all of these different banks, they were saying, oh, there's housing's never going to go down. Housing can't go down. Look at the last couple of years. The housing only goes up, and because of that, it helped encourage them even more to give out more and more of these loans. So between what the government was doing and then also the repercussions of that, people were investing into that housing sphere a whole lot, and eventually when that bubble popped, it hurt a lot of people, caused the entire 2008 crisis. So with that all said, back to the FTX thing. I know I've circled back to that quite a few times now. So I just wanted to share that FTX, there was a whole lot of immorality. There was a whole lot of rampant excess, and a lot of people are saying there was a lot of theft. I personally agree with that based on the numbers that I've seen, based on the studies, reports that I've seen done already. If you guys want to look into that, I highly recommend you doing that. However, I don't really say that you guys, I would say maybe check out a couple mainstream news channels for that. However, a lot of the times the mainstream news channels, like me, they won't dive into things as deeply as they ought to really let you see a full in-depth view on things. In addition to that, you also have skewed things. I don't care what side you are on. If you think Fox is gospel, you're wrong. If you think CNN is gospel, you're wrong. You have to understand that there are skews, there are bents in these media, so be sure that you maybe check out a couple things on both sides. But in addition to that, you will most likely need to look into a reputable third-party site or YouTube channel or whatever you want to do that will dive into the weeds a little bit more, give you more numbers, because again, with these primetime mainstream media things, they won't get into the weeds as much because that's not very popular, because most people aren't interested in going through 5 hours of research, 5 hours of numbers being read off. They're not interested in that, most people, so that's why they don't address those things. So with that said, though, immorality, rampant excess, theft, all that for FTX. There's a lot of bad things happening there, and a lot of those things are making people call out, wow, this is 2001 all over again. Wow, this is 2008 all over again. Wow, this is this, this is this, this is this. A lot of people are saying FTX in particular was a Ponzi scheme. Based on the numbers, I would say that's a very accurate accusation, but that's my personal opinion, all that sort of stuff. But I just wanted to share, so Enron is a company that happened in 2001 that went down, helped sort of spur on the 2001 recession. A lot of people don't talk about that recession. However, there were a lot of things that happened in 2001 that ended up sort of snowballing into causing 2008, just based on all the rules that the government passed, on all the different lessons that people thought they correctly learned from 2001. It ended up basically turning into 2008 and making things worse, which is actually something that we've seen ever since the Federal Reserve. Back in 1913, back when that was formed, we basically saw shortly thereafter a short little recession, and then we saw the Great Depression a little bit after that, and then we saw the Roosevelt recession right after that, making it a double dip. And I mean, basically every single recession and crash we've had since then, there have been different lessons learned that weren't actually correctly learned lessons, all that sort of stuff, and people try to put band-aids on gaping wounds, but they didn't really perceive they were gaping wounds. So all these different recessions and crashes that we've seen over the past century basically have sort of fed off of each other. So I just wanted to preface what I'm going to say with that. But all the way back to the 2001 Enron sort of thing. So a lot of the things that Enron was doing back in the day was they were engaging in like rampant excess. They were like dining on all these fancy plates, on these expensive silverware, things that most people don't normally do, but because they were such a profitable company, because they had all the money in the world, they were spending this money left and right. And yeah, they weren't necessarily not allowed to do so. I mean, the entire U.S. tax system does allow you to do that. They allow you to write that sort of stuff off, but it's sort of excess. I mean, all of us, whether you are Republican or Democrat or whatever else, we all see sometimes stuff like that and we're like, that seems wrong to me. That seems wasteful, that sort of stuff. And I mean, for me, I'm a Christian, and something that we are taught is waste not, want not. And when you see stuff like that, you're just like, you're definitely wasting a lot more than what you ought to be doing as a human being. So I don't care what you think about climate change, what you think about greed, all that sort of stuff. At the end of the day, we do have an innate feeling of that tickles me the wrong way. Something feels wrong here, and that is something that a lot of people say and see with this rampant excess that we saw in Enron and in quite a few other companies, including ones that collapsed in 2008, back in the 80s. All these different major recessions you see, a lot of companies, they reach like this apex of like pride where they're like, I deserve to poop on a golden toilet, I deserve to have golden plated toilet paper, something like that, where it's just like, you might be able to afford it, but that doesn't mean you deserve that, and it doesn't mean you should do that. All that sort of stuff. So that is something that you see along with like the tops of markets. You see people just spending money on the most stupid things that are just like, you get that little twitch and you're like, something's wrong. And that's something that you see a lot of the time. So Enron was an example of that. In addition to that, with the theft and all that sort of stuff, you see a lot of people comparing it to Ponzi schemes. So Ponzi schemes, it's been something that's been around for centuries, but the most famous sort of Ponzi scheme that we've seen over the past decade and some change was back in the 2008 crash. We saw Bernie Madoff have his entire Ponzi scheme. You guys probably remember the name Bernie Madoff. For me, I always thought that it was spelled Madolf, but it's actually OFF, Madoff, not Madoff. I always heard that one wrong. But that was a Ponzi scheme. We saw a whole lot of shenanigans going on in that, and because of how Ponzi schemes work, it's really easy to steal all this money. And why do I mention the entire Enron excess, the theft thing, all that sort of stuff? It's because of what FTX engaged in. And FTX is one of the largest, was one of the largest cryptocurrency brokers out there. A lot of people were using that as their savings mechanism as opposed to using a bank, because they were led to believe by different ads that were put out, by different comments that were said, that FTX was a bank or served as a bank or was as safe as a bank. And that is something that we actually, if you guys are students of history like me, you actually recall hearing people talk about in the Great Depression of everyone thought their money in the bank was totally safe. And because of that, they put all their money in the bank and they put everything they had in the bank. And when the bank runs happened in the Great Depression, everyone lost a lot of money because bank runs sort of do that. Because banks, by law, aren't required to keep all the money on hand. They are allowed to invest. They're allowed to do this. They are required to have a certain amount of money in reserve, but just because of how business operates, you can't just hang on to that money. That you can't stay in business if you do that. So with that said, though, if FTX, they based on what I've seen, based on opinions that I've heard, a lot of people agree that FTX really engaged in very excessive risk taking. A lot of people saw in what they are saying was more along the more along the lines potentially of embezzlement, or maybe not quite embezzlement, but we saw very, 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 very generous employee benefits. Let's just put it that way. These people were basically living on the rampant excess sort of thing that you saw again with the Enron and the other major companies that get their heads too big for their bodies. Their heads are full of hot air. They are just sort of too full of themselves and they end up collapsing. Pride always comes before the fall, that sort of stuff. And yeah, I know a lot of people are like, oh, but the CEO said he doesn't care about getting rich. He doesn't care about money. Well, if you look at the life that he lived, that was a blatant lie. But what do you expect from people like that? So, I'm not going to get into the whole politics of that whole situation, but that is something that you will quickly find if you do look into the whole FTX collapse, is it was deeply seeped in politics, especially if you guys are interested in how it is impacting cryptocurrencies. There's a lot of people doing a lot of name calling, and in fact, the original spat that I ended up causing more or less the crash of FTX was based on politics, because the guy that ran FTX was basically stabbing all the other cryptocurrency exchanges in the back and going to Washington and basically trying to put those people out of business because he was spending all this money in Washington doing they call it something, I call it legalized bribes, but they were basically spending all this money to make all these politicians pass certain laws that hurt every other company except for them, and that's what caused this entire thing to basically start crashing down on that company. And a lot of things happened. This was all just with FTX, but other currencies, cryptocurrency exchanges, that we saw go down, one of which was Celsius. If you guys remember, Celsius was another exchange. FTX ended up, I guess, taking that under their wing, and a lot of people use Celsius as their bank as well. So we see a lot of people using different currency exchanges, cryptocurrency exchanges, as their banks, and all these people ended up losing everything more or less, and all that was getting put together, and FTX eventually became that master bank, and then that one ended up collapsing. So there are billions and billions of dollars that are now missing from people's basically their life savings. A lot of people have actually said on the interweb, they're like, hey, so if I don't get my money back, Mr. Government, if I don't get my money back from this exchange, I'm going to have to kill myself because I don't have my money. If this happens, if you guys can't help me, I'm going going to lose everything because everyone put all their money into it. Everyone put all their eggs in one basket, which is something we see from history, is don't ever put all your all your eggs in one basket. It's just something that is not too terribly safe. Something that I've heard quite a few times from another guy that I personally like following. His name's Patrick McDavid. I highly recommend you guys follow his channel. His channel is called Valuetainment. He provides value in entertainment. Ergo, Valuetainment. He does a lot of random videos too that are entertaining, but he shares some really good economic advice and just practical advice, life advice. This guy, he escaped from Iran. He is a first generation. He's a refugee from Iran, has an amazing life story, all that sort of stuff, and he's seen quite a lot of success in America. But something that he says a lot in his channel is the paranoid survive. And something that you do if you are paranoid is you never put all your eggs in one basket. You always diversify as much as you can because you know, because of you studying history, because all these different things, you know that putting all your eggs in one basket really puts you up for a lot of risk. And a lot of people, if they put all their money in cryptocurrencies, they lost it all. Just like in the Great Depression, everyone put all their money in the bank and they lost it all because of bank runs. And a lot of people are comparing the FTX collapse to a glorified bank run, which is sort of accurate, but at the same time, just because of everything going on behind the scenes at FTX, it's not quite that simple. So with that said, though, the FTX collapse does definitely mirror a lot of different collapses that we saw throughout history. And I know I only referenced the 2008, 2001, and Great Depression, but back in the 80s, the 70s, we saw a couple different bank collapses back then as well due to bank runs. And the bank runs back then, guys, these investments, from my own studies, these investments that these companies had were very sound. Some of them were a little bit more risky. Some of them were getting into the fringes of derivatives, and derivatives are some of the more risky things out there. Derivatives are one of the things that caused the entire 2008 crisis, but derivatives are something that were getting tasted a little bit back in the 70s and 80s, and that did sort of help cause the entire crash. But there were quite a few banks that went down with the original bank that was engaging in the riskier behavior back then, and those other banks, because they were connected, ended up going down as well, even though they hadn't done anything wrong, which is something that you will see quite a lot in the time to come. You'll see a lot of other players fall just because of the wrong choices of certain people. That is not an opinion, that is a stated fact. As soon as some companies start failing because of their corruption, other people will end up getting hurt, no matter how correct or incorrect they were, just because of how things work. Historically, that is what always happens. That is what always will happen, because history might repeat, it might rhyme, whichever way you like to see it. That is what always happens. And are we in the recession right now? Some people say yes, some people say no. I have my own opinions, not sharing that in this video. I've shared that in other ones most likely, but for me, I personally started preparing for a recession back in September of last year. I started preparing. I started pivoting my business. I've mentioned this in other videos. I actually just sold the books up there, but I started buying more low-end books, and in fact, because of my pivoting into lower-end books. So you guys remember from my previous videos, just from a year ago, my average sales price was $70 on average per sale that I did. And now my average sales price is just $35. So my average sales price has been cut in half. However, my profits are unaffected because I've had an increase in revenue because I've pivoted and bought more different things of those lower end things. I've been able to make sure that my profits are unaffected. However, my average sales price has seen a major cut because of the changes in what I've seen personally and what I've heard reported from quite a few different people of just how everyone's spending is changing. You see spending change like this right before recessions, and in recessions, Americans, they start tightening their belts is what people say. So right now, everyone's tightening their belts. They're not spending on frivolous things. So I actually have a video that I want to do on a set of books just over there. They are a beautiful Smithsonian set. Guys, I stinking love this set. I'm looking at it and I'm like, oh, I'm pricing this thing high because I know it's worth a lot. It's a set of 12 and it's a limited set of it, and I'm pricing them for $500 just because I'm like, I want to hang on to these, and I know that these are sort of like a sign of excess. You don't see someone buy a set like this except for if they have excess reserves. And remember what I said about the entire thing about excess. You don't see people engaging in excess until the tops of markets. So right now we are no longer at the top of the market. You guys can have your own opinions on what you think, but just look at the stock markets right now. They are all down for the year. In fact, there are some companies that are down 70%. Amazon itself has lost over $1 trillion in market valuation just from the start of the year, which makes it the first company ever to lose $1 trillion of valuation. And pro tip, you don't normally see stuff like that happen when we're going up. That happens going down. So if anyone wants to argue with me, I mean, it's pretty hard to argue top versus going down. I mean, you see stuff going up, then you can argue with me, but we don't see stuff going up right now. The things that we see going up are actually things that normally start doing better during recessions, including the entire yield curves of different bonds. Right now we see the 3-month bond is actually like hugely doing better for people investing in that than we see for different things. I believe that's how it goes. Yes, the 3-year bond is doing a whole lot better than the 10-year bond, right now, and I know I totally ruined that one, but the reason why that is people are charging more for the 3-month bond because they are afraid of what's going to happen in 3 months. Is that saying something's going to happen? Not necessarily, but a lot of people say that the people that invest in bonds are the smart money of the market. You can have your own opinions on that, but that's just what people say. That's what history supposedly teaches us. I haven't seen that necessarily played out. Are they wrong all the time? No, but they don't always make the best plays possible, in my opinion. So are they smart money? Potentially. Are they the smartest? I would say no. But that's just my own opinion. But again, all that is just what we're seeing right now. So I know that's a lot to share, and I know that just sharing the entire thing about Amazon losing $1 trillion is a bit much, but let me add another caveat onto that. So housing, a lot of us have heard about the entire housing market. Like everyone and their cat was buying housing back in 2021. Just 20 years off there, forgive me. But a lot of people were buying houses. People were buying vacation homes, all that sort of stuff. And for me, I've been studying the entire real estate market as well, because something about studying economics is the people that generally do like some of the best calls are sometimes the people that study the most broad things. Other times, the best people that make the best calls study just one particular thing. For me, I like to study everything I can, and including the people that study just those one things, because it really gives me a nice 3-dimensional or even 4D chess. That's a phrase that I've heard a few times now for like really big strategy. It's 4D chess, which is sort of a fun concept. Like for me, I'm thinking, okay, like chess as it is like, it's 3D, but I mean, it sort of just plays out as 2D. I mean, you could play it on your phone on a 2D screen, but like 4D, like imagine how complicated and cool that'd be. But I know that's a total aside. But back to the thing about housing, guys. So housing, everyone and their cat was buying housing in 2021, and that was all following the flash crash that we saw in housing and everything else when coronavirus, the lockdowns, all that was first announced. And guys, it's slowing down in a big way. Like, we all know someone that bought a house last year. If you don't, then maybe you need to go out more, because like I know quite a few people that bought their first house or bought a vacation home or something like that. In fact, the entire thing with the entire Airbnb business model, that actually changed a whole lot during the 2021 and now into 2022. That changed a lot, and a lot of people are now selling their Airbnbs because the amount of people renting these Airbnbs is severely down, and you don't see giant collapses in stuff like that except for when things start going down, and again, Americans start tightening their belts. And maybe they're not just tightening their belts, maybe they're putting on their like crash harnesses, maybe they're putting on their like headrest, and they're like, I'm gonna crash, man. Getting in fetal position, you know? Maybe that's what we're seeing, maybe not. Some people I definitely would say are getting prepared for a full-on crash. In fact, the Robert Kiyosaki guy, I mentioned him earlier, he's saying we're going into depression at the very least. Like, that's his best case scenario, is we're going into depression. So, yes, that's a little bit of extreme of a view, but if you guys want to get the most thorough, broad view of things, if you want to get the most accurate possible view on what's going to happen, you need to look at the extremes of we're going into depression, and then you need to look at the extreme also of we're going into the best times ever, guys. Like, I know it's crashing, but it's not. So you need to look at everything that you can and everything in between, just to make sure that you know what's going on. Make sure that you can put together yourself what you believe is going to happen, and at the end of the day, yes, you can't know everything, so potentially it could be nice as well to find someone that you really trust for these economic outlook sort of things. For me, I don't want to be that person. I'm not your financial advisor. None of this is financial advice. This is all what I'm doing, what I'm seeing, and stuff that I think would be helpful for people to know and that I would share with a friend. So with that said, though, back to the entire thing about homes. So we can all say that we see the housing market is definitely not moving the same way that it had been moving. And now statistically, with actual numbers, we're actually seeing the rate of decline in home sales actually is now hitting 2008 levels that we haven't seen since 2008, all that sort of stuff. We're not quite at the level of housing sales, like numerically, we're not quite at that level just yet, but we are definitely declining quite quickly towards that level, and it's not great. So personally, for me, I am actually making investments to be able to move into housing once the housing crash happens. For me personally, I am investing in precious metals in order to move into housing. The reason why I'm doing that is there are a lot of studies that have gone into the entire thing of how precious metals and housing move. It has shown historically that these things move inversely. So for me personally, not financial advice, but for me personally, I'm investing in precious metals, particularly silver, because of just how those things move. And these things, they are inversely correlated, meaning silver is going up and gold is going up as housing is going down, and they are inversely correlated. So generally, as you see housing hit its bottom, gold and silver are generally going towards their top, near their top, or just coming down from their top. So it is a good way for me personally to make the most of my money. That's just what I'm doing. Again, not financial advice. If you guys would like to learn more about that, I believe there's a channel called Gold Silver with this guy called Mike Maloney. He did an entire video just talking about this. He actually ran numbers on how much money you can make if you did do that. Again, not financial advice for me, but as I have said before, I recommend getting all the information you can from as many places as you can. Honestly, guys, it might be worth taking a whole week off just to really study what's going on. Don't make a lifestyle of taking your week off and studying things, because then you won't end up doing anything. You'll have information overload and you'll do nothing whatsoever. But it might be worth, guys, just catching up on things, getting quite a few viewpoints. Don't just listen to CNN, CNBC, Fox. Don't just listen to them. Listen to as many people as you can, including the people that are not the mainstream narratives, because the mainstream narratives, again, they're made for the mainstream, which means they're not going to address the caveats, the really, really nitty-gritty things that you might need to know if you guys really want to get a good 3D or even 4D chess viewpoint of what's going to happen. So with that said, though, guys, on to my last thing. So gold and silver. Since I already mentioned that, gold and silver, we actually saw gold and silver do something that they only generally do towards the bottom of gold and silver markets. And that was silver saw a huge leap as gold saw a pretty big leap. And that was just a week or two ago. I can't remember the exact day. But we saw this not too long ago. A guy called Peter Schiff, another gold bug that I follow just because he has some really good info on gold. And yes, he loves gold and he hates cryptocurrency, which I think is really funny to watch because he gets really called out for that. Really amusing if you guys like crypto, just to hear how he gets called out. But for me, I like studying him because he really does like gold, and he sometimes says it's the best thing ever, but at the same time, he will admit when gold and silver aren't doing great, which I think is a really nice thing, because you don't see that from gold bugs very often, because a lot of them are like, guys, we have to buy gold right now or else the world's over and we're going to die, and you're going to die, and you're especially going to, like sometimes they go a little crazy. So for me, I personally like him. He does get a little crazy sometimes, and it is amusing to watch, but he does have some really good input sometimes, and he actually shared something and shared the numbers for this, which brought my attention to it, and I was aware of it. I had seen it, and I was like, oh, that's interesting, but I didn't realize the severity of what had happened. And it was the move that silver had done in comparison to gold. It only ever does that when those two metals are at the bottom of a market. So because of that, he is saying that we just saw the bottom of a market basically 2 weeks ago or whatever it was. And for me, I have personally been encouraged by that. So I have been paying more attention to the gold and silver markets, and I have definitely seen a positive return on my metals since then. I don't know if I agree entirely that we're at a bottom, personally, because I don't know everything, but based on what I'm seeing, based on the numbers that he shared and the numbers that I looked up after that, I would say that there's a good possibility that he's correct. Again, not financial advice. I'm not your financial advisor. I don't want to be anyone's financial advisor because that's dumb. So at the end of the day, though, guys, I personally am making a lot of different moves, preparing for the recession. As I've shared before, though, I've already made quite a few of these moves. I have profited a great amount because I made those moves early on. And again, as I said, we're seeing people tighten up their belts, and because they're tightening up their belts, I'm not seeing my collectibles move as much. My high-end collectibles I've been sitting on for a long time. So for example, some of these sets right here, like this one and the one right there that looks just like it and looks like it's part of it but isn't part of it, these two, that I mean, they're pretty higher end collectibles, these two, and the Smithsonian set that I told you about, it's a pretty high end collectible. A lot of these books back then, they actually are plated with gold. That's what the gilding used to be in a lot of these books, is actual straight up gold. So you can see why they are more collectible than some of the newer books where the gold is not gold whatsoever. And even the color, like, guys, it's like you're looking at a color that's like yellow, and actual gold is more of an orangey, rich. I mean, if you see something that's gold, you feel something right in your chest. You're like, ooh, getting a little excited right here. A little jumping in your chest, a little bit of tingles, you know? It's like, there's something about this, as opposed to the gold color you see nowadays. It's yellow, and you're just like, shiny. It's shiny. I like that, but it doesn't resonate you with the same way. So, like, if you guys ever do get a chance to see gold, hold gold, that sort of stuff, I highly recommend it. Personally, for me, I have this tiny little vial right here. I just like this little vial because this thing, as of a couple weeks ago, this tiny amount right here, guys, was worth $5. Right now it is worth a little bit more, again, because of the change of prices, but I know it's probably not going to come through. But I mean, compare it to the yellow, the actual gold color. I mean, there are definitely very different colors. Personally, for me, I like having this right here just because it's fun to play with. I do have more gold than just that, I promise. But that is something that is definitely fun to keep in mind. I probably will show you guys some more gold in the future, just to do another comparison of colors, just so you guys can really see the difference of the modern day gilding on books as opposed to the old gilding on books, which is actual gold and is actually the color of gold. That can be a good indicator for you guys of how old a book potentially is the color of the gilding on the book. Again, I'll share that probably in another video with an actual piece of gold, probably goldback, because I think goldback is one of the best things to do that color comparison with. So I'll talk about all that in another video. But again, guys, is the world ending? 99.99999% chance no. Is the economy crashing? History sort of shows probably. Again, I am not your financial advisor. I am just sharing what I have personally done. With the pivot I made, I am profiting a whole lot more. I am doing very well, and I know a lot of you are probably doing well as also. But for me, with my business, I mean, I still have a lot of these collectibles. I have these collectibles listed, but the amount of interest I've seen in them has just complete nosedive, guys. And it's not because I'm pricing them at these unholy levels. Like, I know the Smithsonian set, I said I intentionally overpriced, but that's just because I want to hang on to it so I have enough time to make a video on it to share with you guys. So I do overprice certain items just so I can share it with you guys and have it not sell between now and then, because when it sells, I have to like rush and make a video. So I did overlist that one, but I mean, all these other ones that are higher end books that are like $100 a piece, $500 a piece, all that sort of stuff, I have seen a huge crash in those not only values, but also the interest in those books. And again, that's because we're seeing the tightening of people's belts. They are not buying these excessive things. Like, you don't see people buying these really fancy things. We don't even, so I'm actually going to draw a little graph for you guys. All right, here's my graph. It's a beautiful graph. So this is not any specific time that actually has happened. This is just what we historically see. And actually, I'm going to make that bolder just to make it sure it shows up for you guys. So forgive me. Now it's an even uglier line, but this is not any particular market or anything like that, but let's just say we see a crash, and generally crashes will happen pretty hard. Sometimes we see it start and then bounce back and then go down again, which is actually what we've already seen this year. That is a pretty historically normal action. In fact, during the Great Depression, we saw the same sort of move. We saw the original crash, and then it started going up a whole lot, and people put a whole lot of money in at that moment because they had been trained to buy in at the bottom and sell at the top, and they were buying in, and then the crash lost it in a big way. The momentum that they had just completely died. So from the original crash to that, it was bad. Then it went up, and everyone was like, oh, it's over, we're out of the crash. And then it really hit in, and people lost everything. So that is something you see a whole lot. That's perfectly normal, but I'm not really talking about that in this video. So with that said though, let's say the original crash happens and you will see people sitting at the bottom for a little bit. Sometimes the bounce right back up from the bottom is pretty severe, but it doesn't get you back up to the original levels. But generally you do sit sort of lower on for a few years. And in that time, people will start spending once again, and the reason why they start spending is they are like, okay, things have not gotten worse, the world's not ending, all that sort of stuff. So they're willing to spend a little bit. They're willing to buy what they need. They'll buy a little bit more groceries. They'll buy a little bit more than what they did at the absolute bottom, but they are not buying excessive things. You don't see people really start buying excess until you see towards the end of the market where things really start going exponential again. That's when you start seeing people buying all these random things. So so an example that we have is the entire NFTs, so non-fungible tokens, like the NFT art, all these sorts of things. You see stuff like that, random things that people, like old timers and people that are just skeptical, people that are just skeptical in general, we see these sorts of things and we're like, hold up, this doesn't look right. This doesn't look like it holds this kind of value. Why are you guys putting millions of dollars into these things? And that's something that you'll see towards the end of a market, because remember what I said, when you start going towards the exponential part, you see people buying all these excess things that you're just like, that doesn't seem right. That doesn't sit right with me. There are, like, innately humans, most humans have their common sense, and that common sense sort of starts screaming at them, and they're like, hold up, something's wrong here, you know? And there's entire parts of teachings of religions, various religions all around the world that sort of caution you against that in case your common sense bone is broken. But then there's also your common sense bone, you know, that sort of teaches you, something's up here, something's wrong, this is not right. No one should be paying $55 million for a bunch of pixels of a monkey, you know, something like that. So that is something that people will definitely reference. It's something they talk about, all that sort of stuff. And you don't see that generally until you are nearing the exponential part. And the reason why everyone starts bailing into the financial markets towards that exponential part is just because they see their neighbor, who they think is dumber than them, making a lot of money. That is an illustration that people use all the time when they are talking about that sort of stuff. And it's sort of because it's sort of true. We all know that one person who we are like, I knew you in high school, you're an idiot, there's no way you should be making this kind of money. We see that, and because of that, we're like, I don't want to look dumb compared to this person. So because of fear of missing out, FOMO, which is what the millennials call it, because we are afraid of looking dumber than the dumb person we know, we are willing to take a little bit more risk than we would be otherwise. That's just how human psychology sort of works. That's how that works. That's how historically things always have worked. So that's something you see towards the exponential part. That's everyone else, everyone thinking they're smarter than the people that bought in down there, you know, everyone else being like, no, I'm not dumb, I'm going to buy in too. And history shows sometimes those people are dumber for buying in at that exponential part, because they end up losing, because sometimes they get greedy, sometimes they just get scared, guys. Like sometimes you bought in at the top of something because everyone bought it, you thought it was cool, it was a fad. Sometimes you buy in at that point and you lose your shirt and you're like, well, I can't sell now, I've already lost 20%. If I sell it now, I'll eat that loss forever. There's a lot of thought behind that. I'm not really diving into that for this video, but I did want to do this sort of economic update. I wanted to talk about a few things that I know I ended up going long on, but I hope I didn't get too boring. I hope I didn't get too much in the weeds, but I definitely do think, guys, that it's high time that we start looking into things a whole lot more. If you guys haven't started looking into things, consulting actual financial advisors, not me, I'm not a financial advisor. If you guys haven't done that sort of thing, guys, it's worth doing it right now. And honestly, guys, I would recommend consulting financial advisors, consulting all these different people. Get all the advice you can. Some, again, I'm a Christian, some in the Bible, it says explicitly that there is success when you have a whole lot of people advising you on what to do. Wise people advising you what to do. That doesn't just mention do it in the bad times. That's all the time. So I don't care if you think we're going into new boom times or crash time. Always get advice, guys. Advice lets you succeed. When you have success, you can basically make the most of good times and bad times. And remember the entire quote that I shared in the post, I guess, that I made on YouTube leading up to this. There's an old Yiddish proverb. I'm not going to get it word for word, but it basically says, prepare for the bad times prepare for the worst times. That way you can survive the worst times, because the good times, the times that we're seeing exponential increase, you know, those will take care of themselves. I mean, you can be an idiot during the great times and make great money, because remember what I said, your neighbor who's the idiot is making lots of money, so clearly odds are you're going to be making at least some money. But honestly, guys, like, historically speaking, thousands upon thousands of years of human experience teaches prepare for the worst. I mean, just think about farms that you guys see. Every farm has a grain silo. Those grain silos hold enough food for the year. A lot of farmers prepare for a couple of years out. I know with the new move towards, I'm forgetting the word, but lean, that's the word, lean manufacturing, all that sort of stuff, that has sort of led people to get just-in-time shipments of all these sorts of things, which is something that we actually saw a huge problem with during the whole lockdowns, all that sort of stuff, when all businesses were forced to cease, basically. We saw the entire lean manufacturing, the whole just-in-time delivery system totally fail, and that's because it never has worked. People have tried that for thousands and thousands of years, being like, well, maybe if I can just get just-in-time stuff, maybe I'll be able to make more profit, because you can make more profit. But history also shows that sometimes famine does strike. So again, back to the silo thing, nowadays you might not see as many silos, but back in the day, you had silos, and those silos would hold years and years of food for people. They would have enough food to make sure that their livestock was fed for potentially a couple of years. In fact, in the Bible, it says the entire thing about storing up your food for later on. I mean, it's something that is innately in a lot of people's like mental way that they work. They know, yes, I need to save some for later, because there's no guarantee that I'm always going to have this job. There's no guarantee that my crops are going to turn out, all that sort of stuff. And there's a lot of stuff that I'd like to get into just on crops, guys, because there's a lot going on in that whole field. Highly recommend looking into that, guys. The entire droughts going on worldwide. I mean, we're seeing some pretty bad things. Not getting into that into this video, because that has absolutely nothing to do with books, in my opinion. I know it sort of does, but barely. But all that is to say, though, guys, it's worth doing all the research you can, and history shows, human experience shows, it's worth preparing for the bad times, because that's just what shows that you'll be prepared for when those bad times hit. So are we going into bad times? Potentially. Are we going into good times? Potentially. But just because we're going into one or the other does not mean you should prioritize preparing more than the other. I mean, if you haven't prepared at all, I personally would be preparing all I could right now to get ready for the bad times, but that's just my own experience. And before I really do sign off, though, guys, I want to share a Bible story. Ooh, Bible time. So during the Bible in the Old Testament, we saw an entire thing of 7 years of plenty, 7 years of famine. This was in Egypt when the Israelites were slaves there. And in the 7 times of plenty, if you guys remember, we saw them stacking and stacking and stacking all the excess in all the silos of Egypt. And then when the 7 years of famine hit, they were actually taking the food out. The tiny little bit of food that they had set away for those 7 years was enough to feed Egypt for 7 years after that. So guys, that's something that we see, that, I mean, that's a lesson that we hear and see all over, of just setting a little bit aside just for when that famine happens. And yes, I know a lot of people are like, oh, we don't have famines anymore. That's incorrect, actually. We do still see famines, just not in America very often. But a lot of people, because we don't see them where we are, say it doesn't happen anymore. Again, it does. But because we don't see that, we don't think that it ever will happen. And history shows it does happen. That's something called a black swan. It's something you don't see coming that is bad, and it hits, and it can hurt a whole lot, especially when you're not prepared. So with all that said and done, though, guys, I hope this video is helpful. I know it went long as everything, but there is a whole lot of information that I wanted to share. Again, I'm not your financial advisor, but I recommend you get one, because it's very important to know what's going on, to be prepared for what's going on. And I don't care if you think the world's ending, if you don't think the world's ending, at the end of the day, you should always be prepared for at least something going wrong, because what's that rule? Whatever can go wrong will go wrong. Wait, Murphy's Law. Murphy's Law, meaning it always happens. That is something, guys, about the human existence. Things always do go wrong. Is it our fault? Maybe. Is it not our fault? Maybe. But things do go wrong regardless of what we do or don't do. So being prepared for those things can definitely help ease the pain caused by them. So again, guys, I hope this video is helpful. I know it might not be the best thing ever. I know it might be scary. I know it might be exciting for those of you that are the preppers, that are prepared, because history shows that if you are prepared for the crash, when it happens, you can really buy in towards the bottom, near the bottom, at the bottom, as you get out of the bottom. If you invest at those times, you can make a whole lot more money. But there's a whole lot of stuff about that also that some say you should, some say you shouldn't, all that sort of stuff. I think a guy called Graham Stephan, he has his own YouTube channel. I recommend checking him out, guys, if you guys would like to learn about that whole thing about investing at the bottom or at the top. He actually just made a video. I'd link to it, but I don't want to link to it because I don't remember the exact video. But definitely it's worth, guys, looking into all these different things. All these different people that I mentioned in this video, I think would be worth looking into as well. Those are just a few of the people that I personally study. I study quite a few other people who do commentary day by day of different things happening, of events happening, but I also study my old books. Not just my old books, but new books about the old times. But personally for me, I like studying the older books because there's a certain wisdom that we have in the older books that we don't really see as much in the modern books, because remember what I said at the very beginning of this video, we have the modern monetary theory and the Keynesian economist people that they've taken truths about how money works, and they've sort of changed it to work for paper money, which is what we have now, because all these other economic thoughts and schools of thought, they are all based on metal, on gold, on silver, and because of that, they are a lot less elastic on how that works, and because of that lack of elasticity, it makes it so something like paper money that you can just print, like, oh, I have $1 bill here. Oh, now I have a stack, You can make paper money easy cheesy, and especially right now where a lot of the money that we have is digital, like not just cryptocurrencies, but like our actual dollar. A lot of the dollars out there are digital. And because of how all of that works, it's a lot more elastic. And the elasticity, for me personally, I mean, history shows when you move to a paper dollar, it doesn't end well. And, some people are like, it's different this time. But again, remember what I said already. The people that say it's different this time have been proven wrong in history every time. And yeah, short term, they can be right out of the wazoo. That is why I personally study those people as well. I study them for my shorter term moves that I do personally in my own investing, not investment advice, but I do listen to them for those shorter term things. However, for the longer term things, for the lifetime things, for the generational things, I like studying the old knowledge, because the old knowledge, guys, it is tried and true. Whereas these new things, it's 100 years. I know 100 years sounds like a long time to people, but it's not. We've been around for a couple years as the human race, and it's a couple more than 100 years. So, again, I know that's sort of weird, especially coming from someone like me who's only 24. I'm 24 and I'm talking about generational things. I know that's not a normal thing for someone my age to talk about, but because of how I study history, because of how I study the people that I do, I don't think like someone that's 24. That's why I haven't been caught up in a lot of things that 24-year-olds have been caught up in and have lost their shirts over, all that sort of stuff. I study history because I want to be able to have something that lasts, because history has shown things that last are made a certain way, and stuff that doesn't last is made another way. And for me, I find that the stuff that I personally believe, have invested on, and have won in a big way on is the old knowledge sort of things. The new stuff, it just has not worked from my experience, from what I've seen, all that sort of stuff. So all that said, again, I'm not your financial advisor. This is not financial advice. This is just what I am doing personally, what I would tell a friend, all that sort of stuff. So I hope this was able to help you guys, though. I know this is the second time I've said that, but hope it helps. There we go. Third time's the charm. I would love to see you guys in another video, so be sure to subscribe there or down there. Be sure to drop a like. Honestly, guys, show me what you guys think in a couple comments. Like, I do get some comments on a lot of videos, but I'd love to hear what you guys think in this video especially. These videos generally see a lot more interest because people are interested in learning about the economy, and there aren't many, if any, people that talk about economics with their eBay businesses. I know that is a strange thing, and a lot of people wouldn't put the two and two together, but there definitely is a lot of interest in that sort of thing from my own experience for this channel. These are some of my better performing videos. They're the ones that a lot of you guys like seeing as well. So I've gotten quite a few messages actually about you guys liking these videos, which is why I keep on making them. So I hope these videos help, guys. Again, be sure to subscribe. It helps me a lot. Be sure to check out one of my other videos. In fact, at the top, I'm going to link a playlist to the other economic video outlook things that I've already made. Since I've only been around on this channel for less than a year, I don't have many of those. I think I am technically at 3. I mean, I just made one, so technically maybe 4, but this will be my 3rd official one. But I hope this was able to help you guys. Hope to see you guys in one of the other videos, and I'll see you in the next one.